Hello, how are you? Welcome to the CurioClips channel. Let's answer the question. Who were the first animals on Earth? This is a super important question in understanding how life evolved and where we fit into the grand scheme of things. And although there's a lot that scientists don't know about the very first animals, they have some pretty good ideas based on the fossil record and new discoveries from molecular biology. So let's dig in to find out just who these special creatures were. If you asked me this question a few years ago, I would have told you that the first animals were jellyfish. That's what most science communicators will tell you if you ask them this question. Jellyfish seem like a great candidate for the first animal. They are simple, yet they have all the characteristics that we typically associate with animals. They're multicellular, they have specialized tissues, they're heterotrophic, meaning they eat other organisms for energy, and they have no cell walls. Those last two traits are important because they help distinguish animals from plants, fungi, and single-celled organisms called protists. But more recently, scientists have come to realize that jellyfish probably weren't the first animals. Here's why. Jellyfish are part of a group of animals called cnidarians, which also includes corals and anemones. And while scientists used to think that cnidarians were an early offshoot of the animal kingdom, they now believe that cnidarians are more closely related to another group of animals called mollusks, which include things like snails and clams. If that's true, then something else had to come before the cnidarians and share a more recent common ancestor with both cnidarians and mollusks. And as it turns out, fossils of these mysterious animals have been sitting in museum collections for decades without anyone realizing that they were looking at the first animals. Okay, so now you're asking, wait a second, if jellyfish weren't the first animals, then what was? Well, here's where we get to talk about a group of animals called comb jellies. Like jellyfish, comb jellies are free-floating marine animals with no hard parts. This means that their fossils are basically non-existent. Scientists can only study the animals that are alive today or preserved in amber. And despite the fact that they're barely preserved in the fossil record, scientists have actually known about comb jellies for quite a while. The oldest known record of someone observing comb jellies is from 1796, when a sailor described seeing comb jellies in the Atlantic Ocean. For a long time, though, scientists thought that comb jellies were closely related to the jellyfish, corals, and anemones, mainly because they're all gelatinous, transparent, and free-floating. But a 2008 study turned everything upside down by analyzing the DNA of several different animals, including comb jellies. The study found that comb jellies were actually much more closely related to the mollusks than they were to jellyfish and corals. This discovery raised a few eyebrows and caused quite a bit of debate because comb jellies were thought to be more primitive and therefore likely to be more similar to early animals. But the molecular data was pretty clear. Comb jellies and mollusks were more closely related to each other than either one was to cnidarians. In 2013, scientists discovered a new comb jelly species called Nemiopsis ladii, which was exciting because this was the first comb jelly ever found in the fossil record. The fossil was only 100 million years old, which is pretty young in geologic time. It was exciting because it gave scientists an opportunity to look at the anatomy of a comb jelly without the jelly ever being fully formed, which you might have guessed is pretty difficult to do. When you slice through the fossilized comb jelly, you can see its 8 rows of plates called teines, which are used for swimming. You can also see the canals between those plates, as well as the comb jelly's gut and its nerve net. None of these features are present in any other known group of animals, which makes them a pretty good candidate for the first animal. But it gets even better. A 2021 study of this fossil revealed that the Nemiopsis ladii was actually missing a few of the structures that are present in modern comb jellies, which meant that scientists could actually trace the evolution of those structures back in time. And what they found was that the number of plates on each side of the body decreased over time. Early comb jellies had 40 or more teines on each side, but modern comb jellies have fewer than 30. And while the nerve net in the fossil was complex, it didn't have the same organization as it does in modern comb jellies. Together, these traits suggest that the common ancestor of all comb jellies looked a lot like this fossil, prompting researchers to say that this fossil represents an early stage in the evolution of comb jellies, and maybe even the first animals. So are we done? Are comb jellies the first animals? Well, yes, but also not exactly. See, the problem with the comb jelly story is that we haven't actually found any fossils that are older than the 100-million-year old Nemiopsis ladii. So we don't actually know for sure that they were the first animals. For all we know, the first animals could have looked nothing like a comb jelly. Maybe they were bilaterally symmetrical, having a distinct head and tail, rather than radially symmetrical like the comb jellies are. Or maybe they lived in a shell. Or maybe they were fuzzy. Or maybe, just maybe, they were a weird cross between a sea sponge and a comb jelly. And here's the thing, scientists are actively searching for these kinds of transitional fossils, and they've found a lot of interesting things. In 2018, scientists reported finding a 505-million-year-old fossil that had some features in common with comb jellies, including 8 bands of plates. But the plates were arranged differently than they are in comb jellies, and the animal also had a central mouth surrounded by tentacles. Since then, scientists have proposed that this fossil could be a relative of comb jellies that shared a more recent common ancestor with the cnidarians. This would mean that it wasn't the first animal. So while comb jellies seem to be a great candidate for the first animal, we really need to find an older fossil to confirm it. But you know what? Even if comb jellies turn out not to be the first animals, it won't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. Sure, it would be cool to know for sure, but there's a lot that scientists still don't know about the origins of life. And really, we should just be grateful that we have this fossil at all. Fossil evidence of the first animals is really hard to come by, and this one has taught us so much about the early evolution of animals. It has given us insight into what the first animals might have looked like and how they might have moved through the water. And it's revealed a possible scenario for how all modern comb jellies evolved. So whether or not it was the very first animal, it's definitely an important one. And that's why we love science. There's always more to discover, even if we think we already know the answer. Speaking of which, thank you for watching this SCI show video. We make science understandable and exciting, and we wouldn't be able to do that without our patrons. So to all of our patrons, thank you for what you do to make this happen. If you're not a patron, but you want to learn more about what that means, you can go to our website,